My wedding lasted just 23 minutes. My parents never saw a single second of it. Instead, they boarded a plane with my older brother after calling my wedding a little party. I cried exactly once. Then I wiped my tears, walked down the aisle with a man I'd met only 3 weeks earlier, and married the love of my life. I thought that would be the end of the story. It wasn't. 48 hours later, my father's phone rang. His boss had seen our wedding video. One sentence changed everything. "You skipped your daughter's wedding and never told me who her husband is?" Growing up, I learned something most children should never have to learn. In our house, love wasn't divided equally. It was invested. And my parents had already decided who was worth the bigger investment. My older brother, Ethan. If he won a soccer trophy, the entire family celebrated for a week. When I graduated at the top of my class, my father simply nodded and said, "That's what we expected." No dinner. No photos. No celebration. I told myself it didn't matter. I became an expert at pretending disappointment didn't hurt. Birthdays were often rescheduled because Ethan had tournaments. Family vacations revolved around his plans. Even when I landed my first promotion, my parents skipped dinner because Ethan needed help moving into another apartment. Every time, they promised they'd make it up to me. They never did. After a while, I stopped expecting them to. The strange thing about constantly coming second is that eventually, second starts to feel normal. Then I met Daniel. Unlike everyone else in my life, he actually listened. He remembered little things I'd mentioned weeks earlier. He noticed when I was tired before I admitted it. He celebrated my successes as if they were his own. One evening, after I casually mentioned never having had a real birthday party as a child, he disappeared into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, he returned carrying a tiny cupcake with a single candle. He sang happy birthday in the most off-key voice imaginable. I laughed so hard I cried. Not because of the cupcake. Because someone had finally decided I was worth celebrating. That's when I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When Daniel proposed, it wasn't extravagant. No orchestra. No fireworks. Just the two of us sitting on a quiet lakeside dock at sunset. He looked at me, smiled nervously, and asked, "Will you let me spend every birthday making up for the ones you never really had?" I didn't even let him finish. I said yes. Wedding planning became the happiest season of my life. Daniel and I paid for almost everything ourselves. We wanted a simple but elegant ceremony filled with people who genuinely cared about us. To my surprise, my parents seemed supportive. My mother asked about flowers. My father even joked about practicing his walk down the aisle. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe things had changed. Maybe this wedding would be different. Maybe they had finally realized how much I'd always needed them. Then, 3 days before the ceremony, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. Asterisk, your brother has an opportunity to travel overseas for an important business meeting. Your father and I are going with him to support him. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, waiting for the next message. An apology. A promise. Anything. Instead, another text appeared. Asterisk, your brother's trip matters more than your little party. Asterisk, little party. I read those words again. And again. 18 months of planning. The biggest day of my life. Reduced to 2 words. I sat on the edge of my bed with tears running silently down my face. Daniel walked into the room, took one look at me, and quietly read the messages. He didn't criticize my parents. He didn't tell me to forget them. He simply wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "We'll still have the wedding you deserve." For a long moment, I considered calling them, begging them to stay, trying one more time to become important enough. Instead, I opened the message thread, typed just 3 words. Asterisk, I understand. Safe travels. Asterisk. Then I set my phone face down. If they had already chosen where they wanted to be, I would stop asking them to choose me. The next morning, I faced one heartbreaking problem. Without my father there, who would walk me down the aisle. 3 days later, every guest at my wedding would be asking the exact same question. The morning of my wedding arrived with clear skies and perfect weather. Ironically, it looked exactly like the day I'd always imagined. Only one thing was missing. My parents. As I stood in the bridal suite, my phone remained silent. No good morning. No apology. Not even a simple asterisk, we're thinking about you. Asterisk. I looked into the mirror, took a slow breath, and smiled anyway. Today wasn't about the people who chose not to come. It was about the man who never stopped choosing me. Outside, guests slowly filled the garden venue. I could hear whispers drifting through the open window. Have you heard? Her parents aren't coming. That's heartbreaking. I wonder who's walking her down the aisle. Some guests glanced toward the empty front row seats reserved for my mother and father. Others quietly avoided looking at them altogether. Those two empty chairs somehow weighed more than everyone else in attendance. A wedding coordinator gently knocked on the door. It's time. My heartbeat quickened. Then someone else knocked. When the door opened, an older gentleman stepped inside. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his tailored navy suit fit him perfectly. I'd met him only once before. His name was Mr. Harrison. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had introduced him during a charity fundraiser. He had immediately treated me with warmth and kindness, asking thoughtful questions instead of making small talk. When Daniel learned my father wouldn't be attending the wedding, Mr. Harrison quietly made an offer. If she'll allow it, he'd said, I'd be honored to walk her down the aisle. At first, I hesitated. It felt strange asking someone I'd barely known. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see pity. I saw respect. That was enough. Mr. Harrison offered his arm. You look exactly how a bride should, he said with a gentle smile. Confident. I laughed softly. I don't feel confident. You don't have to, he replied. You only have to take the next step. The music began. Every conversation stopped. The garden became completely silent. As the doors opened, dozens of faces turned toward us. For a brief second, I worried people would judge me. Instead, I saw smiles. Warm, encouraging smiles. Daniel stood waiting beneath the floral arch. The moment our eyes met, everything else disappeared. The empty chairs, the whispers, the disappointment. None of it mattered anymore. I walked toward the future instead of looking back at the past. When Mr. Harrison placed my hand into Daniel's, he quietly whispered something only I could hear. Any father would be proud today. It took everything I had not to cry. The ceremony itself was simple. Personal vows, soft music, lots of laughter. For the first time in years, I felt completely surrounded by people who genuinely wanted me to be happy. When the officiant announced us as husband and wife, the applause seemed to erase years of feeling invisible. During the reception, something unexpected caught my attention. Several distinguished guests arrived together. Successful-looking men and women in elegant suits greeted Daniel with genuine enthusiasm. They weren't acting like casual acquaintances. They greeted him with handshakes, hugs, and obvious admiration. One man joked, "You finally convinced her to marry you." Another laughed, "Took you long enough." I leaned toward Daniel. "I didn't realize you knew so many executives." He smiled innocently. "They're good people." That answer only made me more curious. Throughout dinner, guest after guest stopped by our table. Some thanked Daniel for mentoring them. Others praised projects he'd led. One couple even told me, "Your husband changed our lives." Every conversation left me wondering the same thing. How many sides of this man was I still discovering? Later that evening, our photographer uploaded a short highlight video to social media. Just a minute long. Me walking down the aisle. Our vows. Our first kiss. Our first dance. Friends began sharing it almost immediately. By the next morning, thousands of people had watched it. By Sunday afternoon, it had crossed 100,000 views. Daniel laughed when I showed him. I guess people like weddings. But it didn't stop there. Monday morning, the number passed 1 million. News pages and wedding blogs started reposting the clip because viewers loved the emotional story of a bride whose parents skipped the ceremony, yet still smiled through every moment. Then, hundreds of miles away, my father's phone rang. He ignored the first few calls. Then another came. And another. Colleagues, friends, relatives. Everyone kept asking the same strange question. Finally, one name appeared on his screen that he couldn't ignore. his company's owner. My father answered immediately. Before he could even say hello, his boss asked one calm question. Why didn't you tell me your daughter married Daniel? My father frowned. What do you mean? There was a long pause. Then his boss said something that made the color drain from my father's face. I've known that young man for years. Silence. Absolute silence. For the first time since choosing my brother's trip over my wedding, my father realized he hadn't just missed a ceremony. He had missed the most important day of his daughter's life. And he had absolutely no idea who his new son-in-law really was. For 2 days after the wedding, my phone never stopped buzzing. Friends kept sending screenshots of the video. Former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years congratulated us. Even complete strangers left comments saying our ceremony reminded them that family isn't always defined by blood. I smiled, thanked everyone, and then put my phone away. Daniel and I had planned a quiet honeymoon a few hours from home. No luxury resorts. No extravagant adventures. Just long walks, late breakfasts, and the rare opportunity to enjoy each other's company without checking a clock. For the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace. Then we came home. A black sedan was parked outside our house. I immediately recognized it. My father's car. He and my mother stood on the front porch, looking far more nervous than I'd ever seen them. Daniel quietly reached for my hand. You don't have to do this today, he whispered. I squeezed his hand gently. No, I said. I think I do. As we walked closer, my mother stepped forward first. We've been waiting for you. I can see that. My father cleared his throat. I owe you an explanation. I looked at him calmly. I've waited my whole life for one. For a moment, nobody spoke. Finally, he looked down and admitted, my boss called the morning after your wedding. I know. He asked why I never told him who your husband was. I glanced toward Daniel, who stood quietly beside me. Dad continued. He said Daniel is one of the most respected entrepreneurs he's ever worked with. He told me your husband built his reputation by treating employees fairly, honoring every commitment, and helping young businesses succeed. He said people trust him because his character always comes before profit. My mother quickly added, we had no idea. I nodded slowly. That's true. Neither of them had any idea who Daniel was, because neither of them had ever taken the time to know the people who mattered most to me. Dad looked genuinely ashamed. I made a terrible mistake. You did. I thought there would always be another chance. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. There wasn't another chance, I said quietly. You missed my wedding. He opened his mouth to respond, but I gently raised my hand. You didn't miss it because of work. You missed it because when you had to choose, you decided I mattered less. The words hung in the air. No shouting. No accusations. Just the truth neither of us could deny. My mother wiped away tears. We want to fix this. I hope you do, I answered. But rebuilding trust doesn't start with apologies after everyone else recognizes my husband's success. I looked at both of them before continuing. It starts by showing up for people when nobody is watching. Silence filled the porch. After a long moment, my father nodded. I understand. For the first time in years, I believed he actually did. Daniel opened the front door and looked at me. Ready? I smiled. More than ever. Together, we stepped inside our home. Not because everything had been repaired, but because I had finally stopped measuring my worth by the people who failed to see it. Some victories aren't about making others regret how they treated you. They're about discovering you never needed their approval to build a beautiful life. And in the end, that was the happiest wedding gift I could have received.